them, and sometimes I just give summary because Sunday mornings we need to preach, and there's some real encouragement for the saints when we study a passage like Daniel 9. I do not think it is the time to go through a survey of all the different views of Daniel 9 and all the different ways to interpret all of the questions that you have, and to work through all that and then say at the end, but good thing Jesus lives, and be encouraged today. What I want to be the driving excitement of our faith and the real power of the message is that in all that we're doing on that Lord's Day gathering, we're showing how it's speaking of Christ. So we're going to touch on the details just enough to be able to preach what needs to be preached. And so tonight I wanted to take the time, because we're in between the two specific messages that involve Daniel 9:24 and following, all the way through 27. And I want to actually talk about some of the different ways to navigate it, some of the exegetical issues that you can take to the text. You have already in your toolbox, in your tool belt, you already have the tools necessary to navigate any text. And we're going to do some of it now. I will actually ask for involvement a lot more than normal. I really want questions to be asked. I want to be careful. I don't want statements to be long statements. We don't have a ton of time, and I really want to adequately cover all of the text. So if you have points to make, as much as I'm going to try to be as concise as possible, I ask you to be concise with your points. But more so, questions, or a question that you've asked and how you've come to answer it, and then allows us as the body to deal with it. The last thing I would say is, I do have an opinion myself on these. Did you guys not get the speaking tokens though when you showed up? So like, he's already used up one of his speaking tokens for the night. So he only has one left. You only got 2 tokens. Shauna's the only one who got them. Everybody else is free to continue on. Yes, okay, so I have a great many opinions about a great many things. But amongst all the things I have an opinion on, I have an opinion on Daniel chapter 9 and the 70 weeks. I would actually tell you, though, there are some things that I still am like, yeah, I think. I want you to put this in perspective. I have studied this chapter. I have studied basically all of the chapters related to it. I've studied all the New Testament verses and passages connected to it. And I've read the theological works on it. I have gone to schools that have their identity in at least 2 of these camps, the eschatological camps. And after all of that, I would tell you that there's still some parts that I'm like, It's a reminder that there's things that we're going to grab on hard, and there's things that we're going to grab loosely. And but I do want you to grab onto something. It is good to have an opinion on the exegesis and interpretation of Scripture. It is good to have that grabbed onto with grace and peace, because think of the last time you were in a theological debate with somebody. Obviously, you were right and they were wrong. And since you were right and they were wrong, the Scripture says explicitly, you who were right, correct your brother with gentleness. So since you were right in your last theological debate, everybody think of it, including online, or including the things that you just say to the screen that nobody else is around to hear. Were you more gentle than the people who were in your opposition within the Christian circle? And Scriptures would tell you to be more gentle. So let's keep that in mind. All right. Daniel 9 and his 70 weeks. Verse 24. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Observation time, right at the beginning of verse 24. What do I already have a problem with in terms of the translation of 9, verse 24? What is already, maybe I don't have a problem with, but what is already possibly problematic in our interpretation and understanding of this text? Weeks, he says. It's a weak argument. It's spelled differently. But since our brother Daniel is here, we're prepared for all variations of dad jokes. Since he can't help but speak it. Even when he preaches dad jokes, by the way, which is a very unique quality and character in our fellow missionary and brother and street preacher. To preach dad jokes is special. 70 weeks, 77s is the word, have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression. Here's the first thing to notice as we start to look at different views. These 70 weeks, people, number one, debate how long it is. They debate when it starts. They debate when it ends. And they debate who the main characters are in the middle of it. That's pretty much everything. That's pretty much everything. Yeah. I made the summary declaration last Sunday while we were preaching through this, that I believe the beginning of this 70 weeks starts with the decree of Cyrus. Now let's just get it out of the way and to say that you have two basic camps that decide when these 70 weeks start. And it really is, it's structured around what you already think is going on in the 70 weeks. Let me say that again, in a different way. 70 weeks is not a clear passage. It's really 77s. It's got vague references to things. It does. And so that means we, number one, need to use the more clear passages to interpret the less clear. And number two, we need to look at how the Old Testament informs and comments on the Old Testament for us. The New Testament creates a commentary on the Old Testament for us. Not everybody agrees with that hermeneutical principle. Some people believe that when you do that, you're changing the Old Testament. And we're just going to use the word in eschatology, the D word in eschatology, dispensationalism. It's the eschatology that has dominated American landscape for the last 100 years, for sure. It's really in the news now a lot, and I would argue it is important to have this conversation because we need to navigate how we handle the states doing what they're doing, moving around. You don't just have in Israel people waiting to build the temple. You have people like preparing to build a temple in Jerusalem. You have red heifers shipped over there ready for the sacrifice. You have a lot of things. And so I'm going to primarily be discussing this from covenantal versus dispensational, and to navigate how different people have answered this question, because though there are significant differences between amillennial and postmillennial, you don't know what that means, that's okay. Those primarily make up the covenantal camp, and then you have different forms of premillennialism, but particularly we're talking dispensational premillennialism. These are the big debates in Daniel chapter 9. And it wouldn't be right to not address any of the issues. Okay? So, the dispensational premillennial approach says, as much as possible, unless you are forced by the text to not, you have to take everything literally, including prophetic passages in the Old Testament, including Daniel chapter 9. It has to be done literally, which means if it says 70 weeks, it has to literally be 70 weeks. And if you do the math, that comes to about 490 years. 490 years, that's the math. But exactly how you calculate those years, there's a lot of questions about things. But generally speaking, we deal with this time period of 490 years. 70 weeks, or 77s. And your two basic approaches are, those are literal years. And so whatever the start date, it has to end 490 years later. Or your approach is some variation of symbolic, prophetic language is being used, and to some degree, it doesn't mean exactly 490 years. So why does this matter? Here's why it matters. If the decree is Cyrus's decree, that happened, 534-ish BC. How many, from 0 to 535 BC is how many years? 535 years. Is that more or less than 490 years? It's more. So the weeks can't end with Christ if it has to be a literal 490 years, and it has to start with Cyrus. Do you see that? It doesn't end at Christ. It ends some 40 or 50 years, depending on, numbers are weird when you talk about history, but 40 to 50 years before Christ. And so since it can't be that, there are other decrees that are mentioned in the text. For example, the main one that is used for folks who are arguing for these things having to be very, very literal, is this decree from Artaxerxes in Nehemiah chapter 2. So in your Bible, in Nehemiah chapter 2, let me read that section. Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job. So in Nehemiah 2, what you have, and it came about in the month of Nisan in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine. So Nehemiah is his cup-bearer. The king said, "Why is your face sad?" Verse 3, "Let the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies desolate?" The king said to me, "What would you request?" Verse 4. Verse 5, I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor, then send me to Judah, to the city of my fathers." Then the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, "How long will your journey be, and when will you return?" And he said, "If it pleases the king," he continues to go back and forth. And a letter is given. Let's read that. It said to the king, "If it please the king, let letters be given," verse 7, "to me for the governors of the new provinces beyond the river, that they may allow me to pass through until I come to Judah, and a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortresses, which is by the temple, for the walls, for the city, and for the house to which I will go. And the king granted them to me because the good hand of my God was on me." And so that becomes the starting point of the 490 years, and it leads you basically right around to the time of Christ. And they would argue it leads you straight to Christ. And in fact, the 69 week ends at the triumphal entry of Jesus Christ. So that's one view. Literal, it has to be literal 490 years. What I would tell you is that verse doesn't sound like a strong decree to me. When I read Nehemiah chapter 2, I don't know about you, but that sounds like he did give if everything a king says is a decree, he said, "Yeah, go do this." He wrote a letter, made it happen. But Nehemiah told him what to say. He said it and put forth. Where Cyrus's decree was to return. It's a real powerful decree. It holds everything up. So If it starts with Cyrus's decree, how do we get our 77s? Well, if you were to look, I would ask you, go back to Daniel chapter 9 and look at verse 25. And it says, from a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off. Nobody really stops to really be all that concerned on the fact that it doesn't actually say 70 weeks. It says 7, 62, and 1. And does it matter? I think it does. It matters because there is something that happens in those first 7 weeks. Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, and even in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off. And so the idea is you have this section of rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem that takes 7 sevens, and then this time, another 62 that takes you to the Messiah, and then another set of 7 that is the ministry of the Messiah when he's going to be cut off. And so I'm just going to remind you, my general position on this is that the 70 weeks take you from Daniel's prayer to the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So it has to cover that whole span. Because 70 weeks has been determined to end sin, to establish everlasting righteousness. That has to be done within all 70 weeks, is my opinion of that text. I don't know any other way. I mean, that's what it literally says. 70 weeks have been decreed. 70 weeks have been decreed to do this. So this work is what's done in 70 weeks. I'm also, I just think it makes sense that the decree starts with Cyrus. And so we had this phrase from Martin Lloyd-Jones called concealed definitiveness. There's very definitive things being discussed in our text, but it is concealed, so to speak. I don't know that we can really know exactly even the date of Cyrus's decree. There's questions on how historically accurate our records are. It's possible that his decree really was exactly 490 years before Christ. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. There's some debate over that historical evidence. So, hermeneutically speaking, I believe that when you find something that seems to be the truth that it's based on, and then you have other things that are difficult to understand, you allow the most significant and clear to define the less clear. So since I believe that 70 weeks will take you to Christ, and I think the only decree that really seems to matter in the text is the decree from Cyrus, I think the 490 years can't be literal, and it's a prophetic text. And does anybody know, Logan, is the number 7 important in the Bible at all for anything? Seems to be a number that's used a lot? Yes. And it doesn't mean that it's never used literally. It is oftentimes used very literally. But it's a number that means completeness. The number 10 means completeness. So when you see the number 70, you're like, something looks pretty complete. Okay. So I just wanted to lay out that hermeneutical distinctive. That because I don't believe that we are supposed to interpret every Old Testament prophetic passage literalistically, like it has to be 490 years for this passage, I'm a little more open to, I don't want to make it fit. Because here's the thing. You could pull up MacArthur's sermon on Daniel 9, and he spends about 20 minutes showing how if you use a lunar calendar versus a solar calendar, include leap years, you adjust for this, You adjust for that. It actually starts at this date instead of this date. These 490 plant you exactly here. You can make it work. You can actually plan a timeline that takes you 490 years from some kind of decree to Christ. I think it's a lot of work to do that, and I don't think it's necessary, and I think it misses the point of the passage. The point of the passage here is Christ. But now, why does this really matter in terms of our discussion? So as a church, we have a lot of different views expressed on eschatology, but one of the main ones is, has anybody ever heard of a rapture and then a 7-year tribulation? Really? You have to laugh at that? It happened last week, by the way. Did you see in the news? It happened last week. I missed it. Now, I missed the one in yeah. You just said your second one. It's like when you're not supposed to ask questions and you go, "How many questions can I ask?" Oh, there's another question gone. So, where in the Bible is the idea of one future week established? This is very important for our conversation. It's a very strongly held belief that there is a future week of tribulation waiting. 1 week, like literally a week of years, 7 years. There's a